Hey, class, it's Professor Norwood. I just wanted to go over uh, just some quick information about putting your narrative essay together now that the rough draft has been assigned. First off, I guess before you get started, I just want to make it clear that you're working on a rough draft right now, so don't place the burden of perfection on yourself. Don't nitpick your essay. Really, your rough draft is about getting your ideas out. All right. So if you keep the focus on that for this particular assignment, you will be just fine. All right. And just to quickly go over the directions, you are taking part of the reflection that you just wrote, specifically the part where you discussed your own belief. Now you're turning that section into an essay. All right, so you're going to focus on your own belief and you're going to tell a story, that's associated with that belief. So essentially you're doing your own "This I Believe" essays like the ones from the website. All right. So here's a little bit about narration. All right, just to get you started, but also understand that, no two narratives look alike, so you can veer from the rules just a bit, in writing narratives. What I'm most concerned about is being yourself, and I'm really interested in hearing your stories. All right. So, share your story, right? A personal narrative has the following qualities, right? A personal story written with purpose. Some of the ways these essays can go south sometimes is when students write about belief in general, right? Everybody has a belief, beliefs are important, et cetera, et cetera. That's cool and all that may be true, but this essay is more about your belief. So try not to be as general. All right. Keep it focused on yourself. And you'll find like in academic context, the times you have to write about yourself, are can be far and few between. So take advantage of this opportunity. Okay, focus on a single moment or experience. We don't have the time or the space, for you to, basically tell your life story. And I'm sure that you have many interesting experiences that you could discuss, but part of the challenge for this essay is to just break it down to one experience and really explore it. Okay, it could be, one of those life-changing events like, some thing that you wanted to achieve that you finally did. Losing a parent, is always difficult, or losing a loved one. But also, some of the more mundane experiences can, make for great essays. All right. So, that time, you were waiting in line and you felt really impatient. But when you really reflect on that, that can become like a larger story. All right. So what I'm saying is like don't sleep on those times that you may think are insignificant in your life because most things we go through have some meaning. All right, if we take the time to look at it. All right. Combine storytelling with reflection. Like it's one thing to tell the story, cool, but now what's the connection to your belief? All right. And finally, connect with the reader. Okay. Connect with the reader. Um, just be relatable. All right. Be relatable. All right. Here are some key features of a good narrative. Okay. I just said that no two narratives are alike, but I guess that was a half truth because there are some features that most good narratives have in common and or narrative essays. The first is they're organized. All right. Every essay should have a beginning, middle, and an end. All right. The beginning, right? Introduce your topic. Okay. Give your reader some background. Definitely present your thesis statement. Now, narrative essays, you have a bit of lenience, when it comes to your thesis statement. But for this particular kind of narrative essay, meaning like we're writing an "I believe" essay, that should be clear in your introduction. And now, when we write later essays, you'll hear me say, or you'll read, if I say, like, don't use "I believe." But for narrative essays, especially this particular narrative essay, "I believe" is actually fine. Further than that, it's encouraged. So make sure that your belief statement is clear in your introduction. Meaning, when your reader reads that essay, By the time they get to the end of your intro, they should know the belief. All right. And typically your thesis statement is at the end of your introduction, but for these essays, we can bend the rules just a little bit. So if you want to lead with it as your first statement, it's fine for this essay. All right. But again, this essay only. All right. We're changing directions for our next couple of essays. Okay. But you have a little bit of freedom with this one. All right, clear beginning, middle, and end. In the middle, that's when you tell your story. All right, use those sensory words, make your reader feel what you felt, see what you saw, et cetera, et cetera. And then an end, right? Wrap it up. Okay. What was this journey for? All right. Don't leave them wanting more. Give them a sense of closure. All right, for this essay. Okay. Wrap it up. And really, if you're doing your job as a writer, you should be able to wrap up without using the words in conclusion. And when I say by doing your job, I mean that your reader is going to get a sense that it is the conclusion, right? Without you saying it's the conclusion. That's if you've told them a complete story. All right. Use descriptive language, okay? If you came outside and it was hot, how hot was it? Okay, did were the birds, not wanting to land on the concrete, it was so hot. Don't use the cliches like, I could fry an egg on the sidewalk. I mean, you can, I guess, but try to, trust your own way of turning a phrase. However, sometimes cliches fit. Okay. Also, when you're using descriptive language, just be aware that too much detail can overwhelm the reader. So when you're thinking about like what to describe, in vivid detail, think about like what's relevant to your story. All right. And then also sometimes a tree is just a tree. All right. So if it's not really part of your narrative, you think about reeling back in, some of the descriptions. But if it's something that you want your reader to really see, then that's where you really want to turn on your powers of descriptive language. Okay. A power that you all have. All right. So don't expect your reader to just get it. All right. Sometimes we, as writers, we kind of expect our students or our audience, to be in our heads. But an acronym you may see on some of your assignments when they get returned is DARK, meaning like don't assume reader knows. Don't assume the reader knows something because you know it. All right. And then, first person, we'll talk more about first person as the semester goes on. But for this essay, first person point of view is fine. And, it's also encouraged. All right. And then, the belief, right? The lesson, theme, or insight. That's going to be your belief. So again, just make sure the belief you express and the story you tell are interconnected. Okay. Oops, I'm going backwards. Okay, there we go. All right. All right. Um, I always start every semester with a narrative. The narrative is always the first essay in Comp 1. Um, and realistically, you're probably be doing, more narrative writing, even though it may not be called narrative writing, but transfer essays, scholarship, applications, even on your job, sometimes like event reporting or like incident reports often involve, some elements of narration. So you're kind of always gonna have to be, I guess, in the storytelling mindset. And the point I'm making is you're not going to escape writing, once you get out of this class. All right. And narrative writing is probably a lot of what you'll be doing in the future, unless you pursue, writing in some kind of academic context, which I applaud, man. I appreciate because English majors, journalism majors, we're kind of a man, dying species over here or endangered species over here. All right. Okay. Sorry for that long dramatic pause. I was just reflecting on something. All right. Also, full disclosure, I'm an avid bird watcher. and I'm kind of watching the birds out of one eye out of my window. So I got distracted by this dove. All right. All right. But back to our program here. All right. Choosing a topic. Really that for this assignment, recall. Okay. Something that happened to you in your own life. Or, maybe it was something that you were a witness to. Maybe you're telling your story like through the lens of, maybe a grandparent's experience. That's fine. But meaningful personal experience, challenge you faced and overcame, turning point of realization, moment of growth, failure, success, or an additional point, that I just made is like sometimes just our everyday experiences. I just mentioned bird watching. And it might seem insignificant, but it is really over the last decade or so made a significant impact on my life. And it's contributed to, my mindset in a lot of ways. So something that you do every day, right, could be, your topic, or again, like I said, you could go for one of those grand, life-changing events. It's really up to you, as long as you're telling your story. All right, why do I keep going backwards? Okay. What's your purpose, right? Every student wants a good grade. Every student wants a good grade. I get that 1,000%. All right, I get that 1,000%. But I just suggest that as students, um, try to shift your focus from getting a good grade to learning. All right. If you shift your focus to learning, the grade will take care of itself. All right. And when your focus is on learning, the approach to the class is a bit different. All right. So essentially you're asking yourself, like, how can I get the most out of this class? All right. If you do that, the grade will take care of itself. Well, where is all this going, Norwood? All right. So when you write something, you need a purpose. Okay. And the purpose should not be, I'm doing this because it was assigned and because I want to get a good grade. Those are a given. All right. Those are a given. We know you want good grades. Okay. Good, your own definition. All right. But when you take that out of the equation, okay, now why are you writing this assignment? All right. We know it's been assigned. We know you want a good grade. All right. But why are you doing it? What do you have to say? Okay. Do you want to entertain the audience? Do you want to just share your feelings? Do you want to inform them of something? Do you want to teach them something? Do you want to persuade them of something or persuade them to do something or to think a certain way? All right. Do you want to do all of the above? Do you want to combine purposes? All right. But think about it. Okay, think about your why. And I think you should think about that for each assignment. We know about grades and all that good stuff. Okay, but why are you doing this? What do you hope to achieve, with this assignment? All right, aside from, getting a good grade. So one of my favorite, I believe, essays is Kike Aviles. All right, I will take my voice back. You can't see the link because the captions are covering it right now, but there is a link to, the actual essay on the This I Believe site. But this particular piece resonated with me. Kike is an artist, he writes, great poems and other, forms of writing. Um, but also, he struggles with addiction, which is a very real problem. And what struck me most about it is just like the dichotomy of the whole thing. Okay. And Kike, even in the talk, he says he's two different people. All right. But his purpose is to show just the power of art. Okay. With all these struggles he goes through, with all these challenges he faces, he knows that art will save him. Okay. Or art has the potential to save him. So that's his purpose, just communicating that message. And there is some teaching and some informing in there, certainly some sharing feelings. And Kike, being a poet, there's also some entertainment in there. All right. And personally, I think that all writing is persuasive, on a certain level, because we're always trying to convince an audience of something. All right. Whether that's this personal narrative, or your resume or cover letter or what have you. All right. So persuasion is always, somewhere in there when we're thinking about purpose, but think about your own purpose for this assignment. Okay. Why are you doing this? What do you have to say? What do you have to contribute? Okay. Structure, again, um, when we talk about like good, quote unquote good writing, okay, it's subjective. This, it's a class, of course, so we do have benchmarks. But good, bad, these are subjective terms. All right. But one of the elements that could make your essay go over better with an audience is organization. Okay. One that is easy to follow. All right. One that has a clear beginning, middle, and end. One that doesn't jump around, meaning like you're in third grade in one paragraph, the next paragraph you're in ninth grade, then you're back in fourth grade. An essay like that won't really go over that well with the reader. And I know some films, like I love movies, and I know some films are kind of told, like out of order. And it works, in some contexts. But for us, a short narrative, we don't have the space, to get all Christopher Nolan and, things like that. So a straightforward narrative is going to work best for this assignment. All right. So intro, again, get their attention, give them some background, present your belief statement. The body, that's when you tell your story, use that descriptive language. Also, as you're brainstorming the body, ask yourself the journalist questions: who, what, when, where, how, why. Okay. Who was involved, right? When did it happen? What happened? Okay. Why, going back to purpose, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And then, wrap it up. Wrap it up with your conclusion. Okay. Um, Thesis statements. Some narratives don't have thesis statements, some have implied thesis statements, but for us, we're going a bit more traditional in that our thesis statement is going to be, I'll just say present in your introduction. Traditionally, it's the last sentence of the introduction because your intro builds up to your thesis statement. But if you read multiple essays on the This I Believe site, you might have seen that some of them, the I believe statement is the first sentence. Some of it, it comes at the end of the intro. So you can take some liberties with this particular essay. All right, as long as the belief statement is clearly stated, like in the intro, it's fine. But again, just I can't stress it enough. Make sure the belief is clear. All right. Thesis may be something general. I believe in the power of forgiveness. That's fine. I believe that addiction can kill me, but that writing and performing can save me. Cool. Okay. These are both examples from the This I Believe website. All right. Those are solid thesis statements. Why? Because the belief is clear. Okay. And it sets you up to tell a story about, the power of forgiveness or about just the power of art, when it comes to addiction and, some of the other things we may experience. All right. So remember, a thesis statement is going to preview the rest of your essay. Okay. It gets your reader ready for, what's coming. All right. But also as a writer, it helps you stay organized. Right. Because just like a math problem, you can also check each pair. You can also check your work, in writing. Just check each paragraph against the thesis statement. Like, have I stayed, within the confines of this idea that I told my audience that I was going to be writing about? Okay, here's just some tips. It's like I said before, don't expect your reader to just get it. All right. Don't expect them to be in your head because we're not. All right. Describe things to your best ability. Okay. Also, just to go back to how I opened this talk, it's a rough draft. So when you get feedback from me, it may be, hey, can you describe this, or more detail here would be great. Um, or perhaps you can condense this section a bit. All right. So rough drafts, do it to the best of your ability. Okay. Dialogue is great. I'll come back to that point in a minute. All right. Very sentence length for flow. Like if you have a sequence of like short sentences, switch it up with a more complex sentence. And the same could be said vice versa. Okay. Tell one story. Again, we just don't have the space, for multiple stories. Okay. Or to discuss multiple beliefs. All right. And then make sure the belief and, the experience are connected just to get a bit redundant there. All right. I said I would come back to dialogue. All right. So dialogue is important in a narrative. All right. It's like this, right? If you snuck out, this is assuming that, a person is, living, in a situation where they're not quite making the rules yet, I guess. All right. So if you go out, right, you hang out one night, okay, you come in way past your curfew. Okay, and mom or dad or grandma or whoever lays down the law in your house, is standing right there when you come in. Okay. It's one thing to say, like, I came in the house late and, my mother and I had a heated discussion about, me coming in past curfew. Okay. So that's one edit. Okay, that's one version. Another version could say, as I crept in the house, my mom was waiting for me and she said, "What the hell are you doing coming in this house late, so late?" Quote, or end quote, I guess. Right? I think something like that could give your reader more insight into like the tone of that discussion. Okay. You don't want your essay to be all dialogue, right? You don't want to basically write a movie script. Okay. Even though that would be cool, just not for this class. All right. But like some dialogue, could help. All right. So yeah, think about, should I say that, a heated discussion took place, or, should I incorporate some of these elements? Okay. Make a judgment call. All right. And again, it's a rough draft. So, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we can figure out, how to make it work. Okay. All right. Finally, folks, be ethical. Okay. Have I provided a truthful account of events? Now, that's not to say that, hey, it's a narrative, maybe you take some poetic license, maybe use some hyperbole. All right. Maybe you dramatize reality. That's one thing. All right. But just make sure, there's some elements of truth, in your narrative. Okay. Don't deliberately mislead your audience. All right. You definitely don't want to expose anything that another party would not want exposed. Okay. And that includes like embarrassing things, but also like personal information. Don't put anything that's going to jeopardize another person's safety. Also, I do encourage you to like name the people in your narratives, okay? So you don't have to keep saying my friend, my friend, my friend, my friend, or my brother, my brother, my brother, whomever, okay? But as you name it's fine to change their names. Okay, you don't have to use their real names, but give the people in your narrative names. Okay. And then finally, don't encourage any unethical behavior or unsafe behavior. Like, hey, I drink and drive all the time and I'm just fine. Okay. Cool. All right. If that's your lifestyle, fine. But the reality is nothing's happened to you yet. All right. So don't encourage these behaviors, right? If you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, right? Make sure you incorporate some consequence, into your narrative. All right. Don't drink and drive though, or text and drive. All right. Again, this goes back to what I've been saying. Don't expect your reader to just, went too far. Don't expect your reader to just get it. Okay, don't be too vague or too general. Don't fluff your essay up by using irrelevant details. All right. Again, we're not telling a story just for the sake of telling a story, so make sure that you reflect on what you learn. Okay, that's actually a good use of your conclusion. All right, and then like don't randomize things in your essay. Okay. And then finally, okay, be honest, tell your story. All right. Use your voice. Okay. Um, one thing about artificial intelligence, um, hey, it has its uses. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong, it has its uses. I'm not against AI. All right. But AI it hasn't really gotten like human nuance yet. Okay. Um, and it's always like refining, the way it communicates, almost to a level of sounding too quote unquote like perfect or not human. All right. So what I'm saying is this essay should be an expression of you, right? Tell your own story, okay? We'll worry about how it sounds during the revision process. But first and foremost with this assignment, like I want to hear you, okay? So keep that in mind, as you write this thing. All right? So trust your own, I'm skipping around. Trust your own words and ideas. I can't stress that enough. Okay? Just trust yourself. Trust yourself. All right? There's a time, for AI, definitely. All right? But personal narratives not so much because, tell your story. Okay? No one can tell your story like you can. All right. And then there's no such thing as perfection when it comes to writing. Even our textbook, right? Even our textbook. Um, the editors, they have deadlines, but I'm sure if they had longer, there's revisions they can make. Again, that's why like textbooks and other books have like multiple versions, okay, or multiple editions because there's always something that can be revised. Okay, so don't place the burden of perfection on yourself. All right, for this assignment. Okay. And then finally, folks, with every assignment, do your best. All right. I'm happy to help, if you need an assist. One thing I don't do is answer the question like, hey Nora, how's this sound so far? Okay. If you're looking for that kind of help, I would rather read it once it's done. All right. So if you're gonna ask me like, hey Nora, how does it sound so far? My response is probably going to be like, hey, can you let's finish a draft and then, I'll give you feedback. I would rather give you feedback on like a completed document. All right. Instead of, you write a paragraph, you ask me how it sounds, I give you feedback, and then that becomes the cycle. All right. So if you have any questions or concerns, just get at me by email. If you're ever in the Royal Oak campus, I do have an office there. All right. I haven't done in-person office hours yet, because my in-person classes don't start until next week. But okay, I'm gonna wrap up because I'm gonna start rambling. All right. So have a great day, folks. And if you have any other questions, just shoot me an email. All right. Take care.